Hi, everybody. You are listening to the Procure Smarter podcast. I am your host, Dr. Sharon Cook, and today we are going to be talking to Sean Leahy. He is a leadership and change consultant, a current doctoral candidate, adjunct professor at Loyola University, and we are super excited to have him. All right, guys, we are sponsored by the ProcureSmart Purchasing Agency. Come on, if you have a construction, renovation, new construction, we would love to provide your FF&E, furniture, fixture, equipment, and finishes. Reach out to us. We would love to talk to you. All right, everybody, stay tuned. We'll be back with Sean in just a minute. Hi, everybody. We are back with Mr. Sean Leahy. Sean, it is so great to see you. I haven't seen you in a few years, but how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. It has been a long time. I'm glad that I remembered we had met a number of years ago at one of our events that American Hotel had put on, and that was a fun time.
It was a very fun time. Yes, we enjoyed the alcohol immensely.
Oh, we sure did. Those galas really knew how to put on they put on a really good event. So
they really did. All right, well, let's start there then. You cut your teeth in a very well-known family business.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like growing up in you've come a long way from when you started those early days. What was that like?
So, I'd always grown up around the business, being part of the family business. So I'd seen what had gone on. I actually spent summers working there in high school and college, literally just taking orders from customers. And so that was kind of my first start. Because it was a family business, we had pretty strict rules about working. And so you had to really go outside the business to work on your own to get some experience. So I worked I actually worked for some IT-based businesses in e-commerce and some sales businesses. And it was an interesting experience working in sales because I wasn't sure if that was going to be my thing. And I said, I was a little reluctant to get back into it. So eventually I got a job working for this nonprofit group representing the Illinois hotels as their IT manager, helping to promote their website initiatives and their e-commerce initiatives. And I did that for a number of years when I decided to actually go back to school to get my MBA. And around that time, so I got my MBA, I was still working with them. And about 6 years after I graduated from college, I decided to go into the family business while I was still getting my MBA. And so I finished my MBA at Loyola University in Chicago back in 2002 and came to work for the business. And I worked in financial roles there. And that was interesting, but it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't exciting. I like being around people and customers. So I made a move into sales. And I learned the rules of purchasing and procurement in the hotel industry. I got to deal with a lot of customers. I got to really work with a lot of management groups. That was really where I succeeded well, and absolutely loved it. The hotel industry produced some of the best customers. I loved working with them. As you know, you've been in this industry a long time, and so I did that for a number of years. I worked my way up. I eventually managed a team of people. We had split our sales force based on brands. So my team of people initially, we handled hotel brands like Best Western and Wyndham Hotels and Carlson. And so I did that. And actually, even before that, my customer base before that, it was actually Choice Hotels and IHG. And so I got a good round, of a lot of learning customer brands. And so I did that for a number of years. I managed teams, and then eventually I was a director, managed a number of teams in our government division, our non-hospitality division, independent hotels, management groups and stuff like that. and I did that for a while, and then eventually I moved into project management. I have a my background's always been technology and technology focused, so I kind of combined the experience of sales and technology, and really became a change manager and project manager for some of our IT initiatives. So we went through a number of massive IT changes within a 4 or 5 year period. We had to upgrade our ERP system, our enterprise resource planning software. And that was, if you've ever been involved with that, that's a huge, huge undertaking. And that was like a 4 year timeline, during which I also, I was managing, project managing our Office Office 365 implementation. And once that was complete, I actually got involved with our CRM tool. And so that was great because it merged my experience with sales, my experience with marketing and managing people and project management. So I ran that as a project and implemented that across the board throughout our entire organization. And we had to time that with our ERP system because they all tied together. So I worked on that for a couple years, and then eventually, actually right after that, then worked on our change manager for our e-business platform, and I worked with our customers to get them on board. But then eventually got back into sales. So I was able to come back into sales at a different level, where I was managing the strategy and marketing for our organization and our sort of our independent hotels and non-hospitality. And that there was a lot of focus on our on cruise lines, which I'm a huge fan of cruise lines, and campgrounds and vacation rentals. And so vacation rentals, we saw a huge opportunity with that. And so we were working on that, and that actually led right up to the start of the pandemic. And then I took a step back and for the organization's sake, and eventually we sold it. And I decided to then go back to school to get my doctorate. And so I'm a year and a half into that program. And then I was also able to, I was asked by a couple of my old professors at Loyola to actually become an adjunct professor there. So I've been there now for 2 years, teaching courses in leadership and management and strategy and entrepreneurship. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a great journey the last couple of years. And eventually we'll see where that leads. So that's my career in a nutshell.
You've given me a lot here, so let's break this down a little bit. First of all, let's just say,
sorry, I can be very verbose.
No, it's good. It's good. Listen. But the more you talk, the easier this process is. Who was the family business, by the way?
So, family business was American Hotel Register Company.
Right, the Bible of hospitality for many years.
Yeah, 2,000 page thick.
Yes,
book.
Everybody had that giant book on their desk.
And if I remember going into customers' office, I did a lot of customer visits, and if anything, it was always used as a nice door stopper. But people loved it. No, they knew where to look, and so if there was something they really needed, they could go to that book. And that was the best part of it. In my mind, it was an easy sell to walk into a hotel. If they knew who you were because of what they called the Bible in the industry. Everybody knew it. Everybody had a copy of it, and some people had copies years and years. That could be years old. Yeah, and it was a great book because you could find everything. The concept was that my uncle wanted to make sure that you could be able to find everything your hotel needed in one book. And obviously, I would say, 20% of the items, the SKUs in there were in our warehouses. 80% were drop ship, but we at least had the opportunity for people who that would have a lot of capital expenditures and stuff. They could come to the catalog, they could go through the catalog, go through us, and they could buy it. And our pitch to our customer, or at least to some of those vendors too, and the vendors appreciated it, was that we were an extension of their brand, because some of those products didn't necessarily have the sales capability, the sales force to get it out there. So by putting in our catalog, you had, 200 sales reps that could potentially sell that item
Right.
to the hotel industry.
So years ago, I actually toured your offices and I was in your warehouse.
Yeah.
Uh, and you, at the time, you had cutting edge technology in the warehouse, right? Like you
Hmm.
guys were the leading industry in this
Yep.
kind of supply chain.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that for the, we really spent, a good amount in our infrastructure and wanted to invest in our supply chain. It was really critical that we could get our product to customers within, depending on where you were at, within 2 days. And so we actually did a lot of our own private trucks over the years. We eventually were able to put our own trucks in about I think 100 at last. Before we sold, we were anywhere between 85 to 100 markets at any given time. So even though we only had distribution centers in Chicago, New Jersey, Orlando, Dallas, California, at one point Seattle, we could use long haul to get to Denver or Nashville or Greenville or to Atlanta. And so, we could have our own trucks. We'd use long haul to get our product to a point in Atlanta where we could then get them on trucks, usually maybe 3 days a week. And so we knew our customers we were able to work with our customers, especially the really good sales reps, to work with their customers to make sure that they would purchase. If you purchase by 3 p.m. on Monday, there's a chance you probably get it the next day if you were in a metropolitan market that we service through our fleet. And it obviously it cut down on costs for the customers, it cut down on costs for us. It just made it much more efficient.
Right. And because you guys were cutting edge, you have seen a lot of change happening in
Yes.
procurement and supply chain. So, talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing, the changing dynamics of purchasing in the hospitality industry.
Well, I'll admit I've been out of it the last
A little
couple
while.
years, but here's what I would see. The hotel industry wanted to I can't even speak. They wanted to bring things as close together in their orders. They did not. Well, for instance, my understanding is that at one point Amazon wanted to get into this industry, and they actually approached Marriott corporate, Hilton corporate, and the procurement people there said the problem here is that our customers don't want to order small orders here and there. It's a pain for billing. It's a pain to keep track of things. They want things on pallets. They want an order once a month, and they want that taken care of. So I would say over the last 10 to 15 years, you saw the industry saying, we don't want small orders, we want large orders. So customers trained themselves and the procurement people, I'm sure you can agree on this, to make purchases one or twice a month so they could get all their billing together. It was the biggest, technologically, customers wanted that because it was easier for them from an accounting standpoint. They could manage their bills easier. I'm sure you did this. Our biggest week for orders was always the first week of the month because customers said, hey, I want my orders now. I know what I need. And so they would get us our orders at that point. So rather than buying smaller orders, we want to buy larger orders. We want it on one big pallet. We want it rolled up on a truck right to our dock. And then we could break it down and then itemize it as needed. So.
Yeah. Okay, so something that you are really doing now is change consultant, right? Like leadership and
Yes.
change consultant. And so I'd like to hear from you, like, the example of a communication style that works best if you're interested in affecting change in
Mm-hmm.
your organization. And I think in today's environment, we're all looking at some changes in our organization. Like, what kind of advice would you give?
So here one of the things that I've noticed on this, and I'm I didn't. I'm actually working on a certification for change management because I realized I'd actually been involved in so much change management projects for so many years. I had actually developed enough skill set. So, and actually teach it too. So one of the change management models, for instance, that we work with, I've worked with ADCAR, I've worked with, which is a ProSci model, and I've worked with, models are great and all, but at the same time, change is not something that comes easy. Everybody's going to resist it. And so this idea of turning a switch on and expecting everyone to do it, it just doesn't work. So for me, preparing people in advance and giving them the tools in order to do it makes more sense to me. It's a lot easier to do it that way and get them prepped. And the problem is in B2B organizations, unfortunately, that doesn't always work that way because we switch from one tool to the next. We flip a switch, and then even if you get people trained on it, the idea of working with it is a separate thing. So you have to, I think, at some point get people involved, more and more people involved in the process, and not hope that the process is going to work for them. And this is one of the things I've learned in my doctorate program. You can't change the process for people. People have to change to the process. But this is not something that you can do overnight. It can take 6 months to a year, and you have to build it into their daily routine early before you implement the change. I think ultimately, from a technology standpoint, software tools have to develop things for slow and steady changes and not immediate changes. And I got to work because I got to work on Office 365. What was so nice about those changes is those are incremental changes. As time goes on, people get changes pushed out to them. Traditionally, with ERP systems or CRM tools, changes are pretty drastic. They flip a switch every couple of years and add and completely update the software. I know with Salesforce, we didn't use Salesforce, but Salesforce is trying to get to that incremental update model. I think changes like that are much easier for people to digest because they're given over time rather than pushing things out all at once. And so my advice to people is to think about, first of all, the impact of those changes. And we'll get to this in a minute too with my dissertation, is what is it going to look like after the change is made? It's one thing how do you get people involved with that change process, but what is it going to look like afterwards? Just because people say they're buying into the change that's happening, do they feel confident enough in it? And so it's critical after the fact, and this is where I think a lot of organizations fail, is they push it out, but they're not looking at it the end. And there's a lot of research that shows this, is a lot of organizations don't work with the people after changes are put in place to help guide them along the way, because just because you've trained them up to a certain point doesn't mean they've got it. Even after you flip that switch, you have to continue to work with them. You have to put metrics out there. You have to I would say IT departments have to start doing more research and look at the numbers and say what is working and what's not, and then start asking questions. Why are people struggling to adapt this part of this technology, and why are they taking on this more easily than others? And so I think that's a big challenge.
I agree. And if when it comes down to it, we all are creatures of habit. And you
Yes.
learn one way, you get used to that one way, and then operations comes in and says, okay, well, we're going to implement a new software, we're going to implement a new process, and everybody freaks out. And then they just go away and they're like, okay, it's done. That it'll they just assume it happens.
It is. And unfortunately, and I think part of it is you have operations who are not people focused. They're focused on the tool sets, and there's nothing wrong with it. That's their job, right?
Right.
IT people, supply chain people, a lot of those people are focused on what are the tools to make us more efficient, not necessarily on the people. So you have all these different departments with different goals and different, and then they start asking questions. Why didn't this work? Well, what you think works is not necessarily going to work for other departments. Salespeople, as strong as they are in sales, aren't always the strongest people in IT initiatives. And so when I look at that, I say, how can you affect more change in that? And I think it's a constant communication between departments. HR, a lot of times the HR department is the one taking on the responsibility to train and make sure these things are done, but that's not how it should necessarily be. It needs to be a collaboration between multiple departments. And I'm not talking just your directors, your VPs, and you need to get down to the managers. You need to start asking the direct reports, the subordinates, and saying what's working and what's not. And I frankly believe that you should be surveying numerous people throughout the organization to find out what's working, and then bring them together to find out how you can make this a more effective tool. The people that are using it, it's so funny. I was just talking with my professor about this last week, because it's so easy for the directors and the managers to make changes to tools, because many of the time they're not the ones using it. They're the ones telling the other people to use it. And at the same time, they need to feel comfortable themselves using the tool so that they can, you've got to practice, it's the old adage, you got to practice what you preach, right? So I went through the same training on these tools that everybody else did. And I was at a director level because I wanted to make sure that I understood it just as much as other people. Now, the problem is, obviously, from my perspective, I didn't use it. So I did not keep the knowledge going, but I wanted to at least understand the tools. So if I had to, I could go back and say, okay, this is what I think I see. And it created this perception that, hey, at least he's trying to be in the same place as everybody else.
So this is obviously something that you're very passionate about. And is this what led into your DBA your doctoral study? Did you go, I think I can do something with this?
Yeah, and I'm still working on. So it's going to be a more of an empirical, quantitative study. And I came with this idea that, so in our family, as I said, over a period of 4 years, we went through some dramatic changes in technology, and we really took it upon ourselves and built it into our culture that this is a big deal. These are big projects. We need you all on board, and we're going to get you involved. We had we had monthly meetings with the organization. We had a lot of training. We had a lot of showcases with people. We would do these during lunch. People could come in during their lunch break, and we'd have stations set up in our training center so they could actually go in and play on the system and stuff like that. And so we really put a lot of these processes in place from an innovation standpoint. And so I thought that was really cool, so that people could get excited by, look at these new tools we're adding. It's really going to make a difference. But the reality of the situation is, once you turn on the tool, things change. And so this idea of adoption, there's a thing called technology adoption, or technology acceptance model. And you may have heard of it in your doctoral studies as well. And now I don't know if this will be the final model I work with, but this idea that depending on this perceived ease of use of technology, people may or may not embrace it. And so that affects their perceived use. So if they don't find it easy to use, then they don't find it useful to use in the long run. That's kind of the way this theory works. And so initially, it was funny when I wanted to talk, when I thought about my doctorate, I thought, how does family firm culture have this direct impact on technology? And I started going through all the looking at research and reading papers and then I actually was going to go in a totally different tangent, not related to it. I even looked at procurement in the cruise industry because I, like I said, love cruises and stuff. But I ultimately I came back to this idea of family business, and I said, for one, I've been heavily involved in this concept of family business. I've gone to conferences on family. I've spoken at conferences on family business. Uh, I have actually, I am taking courses on family business. Being a board member, I got to see the family business from one perspective. So I've been really heavily involved in it. And I said, there's a lot here that I need to go through. And so what I did was I started thinking about it again. And I looked at when I looked at this concept of technology acceptance and technology adoption. I said, well, there's a lot of research that talks about how family firm culture can affect the innovation in organizations. But what they're not looking at is what happens afterwards. What happens after the software or the tools have been turned on? How does that culture, what's the cultural impact of individuals using technology? And so I again, I'm it's hard, and I'm sure you've seen this coming from your doctorate and your dissertation. You don't want to build a personal experience into it, but at the same time, my personal experience is what came to this. I drew me to this idea of how does family culture affect technology. So that for me is where I'm coming from at this point. So I'm still like noodling how it's going to look. I do believe that there is a huge connection here, because one thing I do know is that family businesses can be very innovative, but at the same time, quite opposite, they struggle to be innovative. And I think sometimes businesses struggle to be innovative, but still feel they have to adapt to technology. It's basically adapt or die. They get to a point where they're like, we have to do this, we have to push it out, but they don't look at there's so many pieces that will change in that process. Just putting technology is not enough. You need to understand the whole process of how it's going to affect your culture and how the culture can be utilized to bring people to get more involved with that, to get more in the process of accepting and actually embracing that new technology.
I think it's a great topic. I would read it. I know lots of people in my profession would read it. I think it's a fascinating topic.
Yeah.
How far along in your process are you? I know for me it took 3 years from start to finish. Where are you at in that timeline?
So I'm a year and a half into it. So it is like yours, 3-year program for your doctorate. And obviously, as a practitioner scholar, they push you along pretty quickly. So
Yeah.
You learn the research processes for the first year and a half. So I'm ending that now. I'm actually in the process of writing my prospectus, which is essentially a mini version of your
Right.
dissertation, and so I'm going to have a rough draft by the end of the month, and so, but this is a long process. So as you know, so it's a long haul. The expectation is to defend my dissertation by next November. So yeah, so that it's a year and a half of learning the research methodologies, and then it's a year and a half of the dissertation. So
well, let me tell you, there is nothing more terrifying than defending a dissertation. So when you do it, come to Greenville. I'll come to you. I'll buy you a drink. We'll celebrate. It's a huge moment.
I appreciate it. I see my university they put links to people when they've successfully defended their dissertation, and they're always welcoming Dr. So and so. So
You know what? I love to talk about it. When I defended my dissertation, when it was all over, it was done via Zoom call. My chair, everybody had hung up, and my chair was on the line, and he said, officially now you can call me by my first name. And I was like, yes. That was
It,
amazing.
that's funny. Some of my professors do like they don't care. They're like, you can call me first name because you're already in the doctoral program. Others are they're pretty still like, you still got to call me by doctor or
Yeah.
professor.
Well, let's talk about something a little bit more on the personal side. I had
Yeah.
read that you are very big into meditation.
Yeah, I was interested in how you got that. So
I
yeah,
do a lot of digging.
I am really impressed. So I actually about so is it seven, so it's 22 8 years ago I got introduced to a group called the Hoffman Institute, and they're out in California, and a lot of people just going through life changes, crossroads in their lives, go out there, and essentially it was like a full week of meditation, and getting in touch with yourself. um, I will admit the last 2 years I haven't meditated as enough as I should, and I
Right.
really need to, right? um, so I really focus more on uh, a Buddhist style of meditation, not a transcendental one.
Hmm.
I know people do TM, but I'm more of just focusing, and so when I do it, I get a lot more clarity in my life, and so I get it's really, really good for the brain. And I think people underestimate the health benefits of it. And I think people need to do it more. Um, I can always, your body is naturally in this natural stress state, whether you know it or not. And I can feel it. And then when I do meditate, I can actually feel that stress release, even if it's for a 10 minutes or not.
Yeah.
And so I have a meditation app that I use where I have someone who speaks to you and puts you into a state, and it's beautiful.
I love it. I am just starting. So what happened is I went to a yoga class, and
Mm.
at the end of the yoga class, they said, hey, if you want to hold over, we're going to do a 20-minute meditation session. And I was like, well, I'm tired. I'll just stay for the class. And I loved it. I feel like I'm a little ADD just in general. And
Yeah,
it
I know the
really
feeling.
helps. And you ever have something noodling around in your brain, but you can't just figure it out? You can't just grasp it. And I find if I just take 10 or 15 minutes and get really quiet, my brain will work it out eventually.
That's exactly, yeah, and it does help. And I think as I get into this dissertation process, the next few year and a half, I'm going to need it more.
Probably so. Probably so. Okay, Sean, one final question. With all your years in hospitality, who inspired you or who inspires you today?
So, I have a lot of people. I would say if I had to say anyone, it's my wife. She really inspires me, and I'm not just saying that because she would
She's
listen to this, but I
listening.
mean it. But I really, she inspires me. She keeps me going. I think if I didn't have her in my life, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at. And she keeps me on my toes. So without her, she keeps me grounded. She keeps me focused. Um, she's a huge support in my life. My my in-laws are also big supporters of where I'm at in my career, because they know that this was a big deal, me leaving. Well, we sold the business, so I kind of
Right.
had to leave. But
Yeah.
some people could just say and mope around, not do anything. I looked at it as it's a time to make a change in my life and do something different. And I had actually been considering going back to school anyway. But anyway, going off on a tangent. So they were very supportive of this decision. Um, and even back in the day when my father was still alive, he was a big supporter of where I was going. And he had no problem telling me how proud he was of me. And I
Aw.
know that a lot of parents struggle with that. My dad never had a problem with it. So
Your dad was a wonderfully sweet man. I've met him several times.
Oh,
So,
thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
well, Sean, thank you so much for doing this. I
Well,
really
thank you, Sean.
appreciate
Really
it.
appreciate this.
Okay, hold on.
Okay.